Hey, welcome back everybody to the Plone Podcast. And today with me is Annette Lewis, who's a developer at 6 Feet Up, but she's also been big in the Plone community for quite some time now, made a pretty big splash on the Plone community stage in Boston as a keynote speaker for the 2016 conference. So Annette, I guess the way everybody got to know you was because you were this kind of whiz at Plone through the web development, because you didn't have access to the file system and you were doing amazing things despite the fact that you had your hands tied behind your back. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that time?
Sure. Okay. So part of that is the benefit of not knowing from the other end. So I had some training, but I didn't have extensive training with Plone when I started. So I said, okay, I'm going to read documentation. I'm going to find a way to make this work. And I found a way to make things work. I did a lot of manipulation of files, but then I realized, oh, I can go into the ZMI. I'm like, oh, there's files and templates here. And then I learned about Diazo, and that would just completely change the game between the files, like having access to the ZMI, being able to use Diazo to manipulate all the files and such. I was able to almost kind of build my own CMS-y feel on top of Plone to do things and to trigger different reactions depending on whether a portlet had a certain title or something had a certain name, and like move and manipulate my content. And so at Penn State University, they had a Plone users group, and I was a frequent visitor. It was great to have a group to help. And they always had this section like, well, do you want to discuss anything? Do you want to just talk about things you did? And that time I chimed up and said, well, here's something I did with the site I'd been working on. And I remember getting through saying like, okay, this is what I did, and all the weird little things I hadn't managed to cook up in Plone. And then someone turned to me and said, wait, all through the web? And I was like, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So
Yeah,
that was my start. And
that's one of the big strengths of Plone, that's one of the things that drew me to it, which is once you install it, you can turn people loose on it, and they pretty much can't damage. I mean, they can damage it. They can damage a site, but they can't damage the whole installation. But they can go ahead and do all these sorts of amazing customizations in addition to all the features that are built right into it. But yeah, so that particular set of meetings that you guys were having at Penn State were really quite big. I mean, I remember talking to Rob Porter and Eric Steele, and Penn State's Webline was a really early adopter, a really heavy hitter in terms of Plone teams at universities, certainly in the US. And so I remember at some point, Eric Steele said, if you're thinking about a keynote speaker, we should definitely get Annette. And we go, who? And so we'll get into the story of the keynote, but you were somebody who were essentially dropped into Plone. So because that's one of the questions I always want to ask guests on the podcast, like, how did you come to Plone? Like, how did you choose Plone? And it turns out you didn't.
Yeah, that's true. So I had a long background in web development, but nothing professional. It was just a hobby I picked up when I was like 12 years old. Like, I saw websites and I wanted a website too. So my mom and dad had books laying around, and I borrowed them, and I started reading up about HTML and CSS and just pushed myself into having a website. And then that just kept learning, HTML and CSS. And then I started learning programming languages. And then I saw a job at Penn State, and they said Plone. I'm like, I have never heard of this thing before in my life. And so I'm like, well, what do you do when you have a new technology you've never heard about, but you want to apply for the job? You download it and you try and install it. So here I was on my Windows PC, just trying to install Unified Installer, and like I got it up and running, and just started poking around at it, and it was a whole different world of development compared to content management systems I'd worked with. And I was just like, well, this is enough knowledge for this interview. So I went in and, I got the job, and that's how I started with Plone. And I just starting to learn it rapidly as I needed to do my tasks. But that was part of what was nice. Like, it has a really strong through the web story. So getting started with like doing content, putting things together, and then especially getting into Diazo just on the front end, I was able to get a site out within like a month or two. My first completely themed site. That was fun.
So you mentioned that you were interested in having a site of your own, and that's how you started being interested in building websites. So can you tell us a little bit more about that first website? What did you end up building?
Sure. So I'm into this Japanese animation called Sailor Moon, and it back in that time, internet was something that we knew about, but I had a dial-up modem. I knew the beep boop bops to get me online and exactly when it was going to come up. And I remember I was with a group of friends, and there's more Sailor Moon on the internet, and that's like mind bending. So I the internet and I found out that people were making, fan sites with just information, stories, their own drawings, all of that kind of stuff. And I said, well, I want to get into this world too. And that's where I started. I wanted a Sailor Moon website. So I got out a book and I started reading, and that's how I started learning about all of it.
Wow. And how long did you end up maintaining that site? Do you still have it?
Oh, I maintained it for quite a bit. The original sites aren't up yet because those services have gone down. Like GeoCities is a thing of the long past. Every free service possible, I think I tried it out at some point because, I was a kid and my parents were probably like, what's she doing? I'm like, I'm building a website on the internet, the World Wide Web, don't worry. And so I just found free services and ways to get things out on the internet on my own. So a lot of those have gone down, but I still have files for a lot of those. And I'll tell you, CSS has come a long way. HTML spec and semantics have come a long way. I would never republish those frames, but it was a great learning experience.
That's really cool. So Sailor Moon is still a passion of yours, right?
Oh, it definitely is. It's my favorite series. Now, it's one of those things where it's a heartfelt series. I grew up watching it. A lot of friends I ended up watching it. It's how I became a webmaster when I was in college. I was in my residence halls association. I was in the anime organization. I was a webmaster for that. And all the skills started off with me having seen Sailor Moon and decided I wanted to get into the online community. Even drawing, working with Photoshop, InDesign, like I would dare say like that was a basis of a lot of my creative skills. And even now, like singing, writing music, and I sew. Usually Sailor Moon was the beginning of those things.
My gosh. So you're one of the kinds of people that I meet quite a bit of, which is that you started off not at all interested in computers for computer's sake, but you kind of grew into it. And it's one of the things that I know some people feel like when when an organization is hiring, that they need to see a credential or a diploma from a particular type of program that's related to computer science or software engineering. And yet here you are. I mean, your background is quite different. What college degree? Wait, it's degrees, right? Did you get?
Yes, degrees. So that's always a funny and shocking thing when I send people my resume, because as you said, you'll expect to see computer science, internet technologies. So when I slide in my resume and it's pre-medicine for my bachelor's, and then I have a master's in biomedical science, they really kind of think, huh? But I have the skills to back it up because I've been doing it for so long. I had basis. So people took a chance on me. And now I'm getting more professional development on top of that.
Have you ever thought of, and
But
not that I would ever want you to leave 6 feet up, but I mean, if when I think about the application of computer technology, I mean, I've always felt like the most interesting use of a software developer's talents was not just in writing software for the sake of writing software, but to apply those skills to a domain that needs software development skills. So have you thought about maybe doing something related to medicine or biotech, applying your skills in those areas?
Well, I always think about it. I mean, like, one thing that's been really fun about 6 Feet Up, especially, is the variety of projects that we get. So the thing is, like, there's always that you can get things that are related or have some interest to me just by working here because of the variety. So I'm not like on a rail to a single path, which I've always found exciting. But I always consider it because I do have that skill. Like, I have technical skill for programming and development, but I also have that knowledge of like medical. I have a lot of physiology, since my biomedical degree was actually at a medical school. So I've had a lot of experience and knowledge there. So my mind is into things, but right now I'm really happy with the diversity we get at 6 Feet Up.
That's cool. Yeah, there's there's a couple of software developers I was talking to recently, and one of the things that they felt in large organizations, it's hard to avoid getting pigeonholed, and like the tasks get divided up in such fine ways that you kind of end up not really being able to move around very much. So it is nice to have a variety of projects coming in, which, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm not at a big organization anymore. But so with some of the, tell me a little bit more about how you grew up, because I think like me, there's a bit of an immigrant experience here in your past.
Yes. My parents are actually not from here. They come from the Caribbean. So I'm first gen American. I was born here, but when you're so close to like the heritage of your family, your household sometimes doesn't feel like it's in the same neighborhood as everybody else. But that also brings a lot of resilience, because even without, like, we're all English household, I didn't have to do code switching, but I did a lot of code switching. And I think part of that helped nurture a lot of what I did as a kid. Of course, I got that push to excel because I had opportunities that they wouldn't have access to, like just the infrastructure, the internet, the speed that we have here. That's something that we wouldn't have in their home country. But I also was just like, okay, I have to take advantage of everything I can, but I also have the cultural, like, I'm not going to look at the world with just the context of what I get from my immediate social surrounding, because I have the American culture context and then where I was in New Jersey, but then I have my parents' cultural context. And that, I think, really helped me open up my mind, because when we move through life a lot, we move with a lot of biases. They're onset, sometimes unrealized biases, and some of them are just simple things like putting a U in color.
Nice. Very nice.
um,
Ooh.
but when you have multicultural type of homes, you start thinking about how everybody looks at things. And I know that comes into my development experiences a lot. Like, even though I'm here in the United States, the internet is worldwide, and we're dealing with a great range of different audiences. So I always think about, well, if I took myself out of the context of where I am, how would this look to somebody else? If I was in the context of my parents, if I was in the context of some of my friends overseas, and how can I work that into my work to make sure that this is going to be more solid and more accessible, or just make more sense to anyone who inherits it? So I put that to my parents, and then they also gave me a lot of curiosity. I played a lot outside. I went to their home country several times, and I played a lot there too. So I was always into exploring and trying new things.
Wow. Yeah, after having worked with you for, I guess, over a year now, so probably, yeah. I mean, it just feels to me like you're one of those people that is a sponge for learning, and for you have so much curiosity. It's one of the great things about for me of having met you, and having gotten to see how you've gotten your feet wet with the kinds of projects that we work on, but then you've been able to dive in so deep, and you've found, well, I'm thinking in particular of one solution with everybody who's watching this hopefully knows about Easy Form. And there's this one project that Annette and I have been working on, which required some really fascinating work that you did, that you came up with. I want you to describe it a little bit more, because I want you to do it justice.
Sure. Okay. So it also a question, usually a question from the client. Can we do this? And my first reaction is usually, well, I never say yes first, because that's a dangerous response. But I'll never say no first either. I'm always going to say, I think it's possible. Let me look into it. And with Easy Form in particular, they wanted a way to have mass submissions to this form, so they could upload like a CSV and be able to submit multiple entries. And some of the existing add-ons that they had out there weren't quite what we were looking for in that case. We wanted something that had a really one-to-one experience with the normal form, and not having to necessarily put extra code to process specific fringe cases or such on the form. And we still wanted it to be able, they could edit the form whenever they wanted, they could change it and still have the form experience. So I took a deep dive into Easy Form, and then a deep dive into CRUD forms, and the deep dive into C3C forms, the whole stack that built Easy Form up. And I was able to come up with a CSV multi-form importer. And what was fun about that is, first of all, I did the CSV, and that was kind of easy. You do a CSV, you get the form fields, you can just go through the keys and you match up the two, and then you just push it into the forms one by one. But then I thought to myself, for a user experience, that's not really great, because they submit something to the black box and then they hope it comes out on the other side. So after that, I talked to my project manager and, brought up this problem, said, this is going to work, but it's not going to work well. And as an editor, I wouldn't feel comfortable blindly submitting things and not necessarily knowing what it was doing. So we came up with an intermediate view. So now you could go into the CSV importer. On any form, there was a view that you could go into for the import view, and that would allow you to download a template CSV with whatever form fields were available in that form for you. You could fill out that CSV, upload it, and then that would give you an intermediate view that was based on the CRUD form. So I did a lot of like inheritance and like a lot of just use what they got. Don't build more, have to just end upon what exists, because when things get upgraded, then you have a lot less work to do if you didn't copy and paste the whole component in. So with that subclassing, the intermediate view actually printed out all of the CSV data in like a like the managed forms view that you go into when you're looking at the data manager, the save data adapter. And then that way the user would have a chance to edit the fields or erase things, fix form data from the CSV import. And then when they hit submit, it submits it as if it's an actual form. So it would do all of the mailers, all of the actions, all of that stuff gets processed just as if you had submitted them one by one. And then with that, I felt the user had a good experience where they could upload, check, apply, and then everyone gets their confirmation emails or mailers. They don't have to do extra work on it.
So, and the thing that, in addition to just, you can tell, I mean, hopefully listeners or viewers can tell how intricate this is, but it was mind-blowing when I saw what you were able to accomplish. And then on top of that, I mean, I remember trying to dig into the Easy Form code and going like, I don't think I know what's going on here, but here you are, you've built this thing. And so probably the next question that everyone has on their mind is this feature now open sourced?
It's not open source yet. I really need to push it to a branch, because there's a little bit of nerve-wrackingness when you push something into the great big world and you're like, okay. But I know with the Plone community, they're really great about helping. And I feel like if once we get it pushed out, they'd probably be able to take it further than I did. Like, as you mentioned, I was just digging into this form to make this work. And I'm still not an expert, definitely, on ZC3 forms. It's amazing what is down there below the layers. But it's great how you can build on top of it too. So I feel like some expert advice from those corners, we could really shine this up and get it out as just a here, mass import.
I like how you're making it seem like you're not really sure that what you built was worth releasing into the public, but into the public domain. But this is your typical imposter syndrome, right? I remember there was a talk that Denis Mashunov gave in Barcelona about exactly about that, and about people not feeling like they were worthy somehow. It's like, oh my gosh, Annette, you are so smart. And this is,
And
and
I've also given a talk kind of imposter syndrome, and just you've got to just take a chance. Like, even if you're not sure, like I've always said, talk at events, even if you're nervous, put out a lightning talk if you can't do something big, because that is the best way to nurture yourself as a developer, no matter how uncomfortable or shaky you feel on the ground.
and one of the things that's great about the Plone community is that there are so many opportunities to kind of put feelers out and let people know that you've done a thing, and then get that feedback. And it's such a welcoming group of people. Um, I'm, I remember thinking many years ago when I first started doing things with Plone at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, and thinking, oh man, like these people like at Penn State, the Webline people, they're like, but they're just so nice and so eager to help. That's one of the amazing things about the Plone community, that it's just a group of super smart yet really friendly people. Have you, so in your travels now with Plone, you've been working with Plone for 7 years, longer than that?
Yeah, it was about 8 years. I always remember July 2013 is when I started.
So have you been to any other Plone events? Like you were, okay, so at some point I'm going to talk about the Plone conference in Boston, but other than that one, have you been to any others? I guess probably not, right?
No, I haven't had an opportunity. Like the place where I saw the most Plone people was the Plone users group, and that was monthly. Make sure to get to every one of those possible. But aside from that, yeah, Boston Plone conference is the only other like big Plone event I've been to.
So that's something that we're going to have to find a way to get you to. Even though I guess for last year and this year, the Plone conference is going to be online. Um, well, maybe next year, right? We'll have to, okay,
Maybe.
so yeah, every once in a while, people go, Ken, would you like to organize a Plone conference? And I want to say yes, but I'm being told no, don't do that. But we'll see. We'll work out a sprint or something like that. So one of the things that you do for 6 Feet Up is you write quite a few blog posts, and one of the things that you've written about is Vaulto. And do you want to say a little bit more about how you've taken some steps to use Vaulto, and would you say that this is something that you're eager to try out more of, or like how do you feel about Vaulto?
Oh, definitely. Like, what's neat about Vaulto is, while Vaulto is still Plone, it's so different at the same time. But that's because you're getting the Plone base, but now you've got to react. And with the way that the web is shaping up, and especially a lot of app first web development instead of like site first styles, that app pattern comes in really handy. I'll tell you, I tried to write an app-like experience in like not a JavaScript front end. It can be really nice to have that framework like React for you, because it takes out some of it builds in a lot of like the state management and some of those things where you can with vanilla JavaScript, but that framework really helps you. So when you put that on top of Plone and it's a RESTful API, and now you've got the ability to make app-like experiences instead of that website experience. And that's really exciting to me. So the best way to learn anything I've always did is find a project and start working on it. And so I've been just going through it, just saying, okay, today I'm going to build this thing and then try and build this. Today I'm going to do this and try and do that. So I've been learning little by little. And then, of course, a lot of my blog posts are just things that I've figured out and like comfortable patterns for how I've gone through things. And of course, I always refer back to the trainings, because the Mastering Plone training is excellent. I've gone through it. They update pretty frequently. So I like to go through it and see, okay, what's new? What has changed? What's a good pattern? What's a good development way to do this to make sure it's going to be successful and move it? And then what I try to do in some of the blog posts is make sure I do those examples myself, try and make something useful, and then kind of distill it into like small chunks. So if somebody is really might be overwhelmed with the whole system, they can just say, okay, here's a small chunk of how to do this. Here's a small chunk of how to do this.
I think those kinds of blog posts are really helpful because you can present somebody with the full documentation or even the entire Mastering Plone course, and yet it's nice to have somebody kind of guide you through it and say, these are some interesting highlights that were helpful to me, and that kind of overview blog post is super. Any more documentation, I guess, more guidance is always good. So just thinking back to I'm going to keep going back to the Boston Plone Conference. When you gave the keynote, one of the things that came out of the keynote was that you've told me over the last year and a bit that you're very shy, and there's no way anybody would ever believe that. So there was, I remember when Eric Steele mentioned you as a potential candidate for giving the keynote speech there. He said, yeah, she's this great developer. She does all these amazing things with websites, and like she does these hula hoop things. And so, and I've gotten to see up close in person what these hula hoops look like. Do you want to tell us a little bit more how you even got into hula hooping?
Sure. So that's one of those like side hobbies that people are like hula hooping, and there's so much more to hooping than you would ever know on the surface, because a lot of us think back to like that classic 60s 70s, you know, beautiful dresses, and yeah, and we've evolved really far past that with hooping, where now hooping, hoop dance, hoop performance, hoop manipulation are kind of phrases you would hear. And so I'm really into like the hoop dance part, where it's just a great creative expression. It's actually kind of meditative too. There's times when I'll just put on some music, go out into a field of grass, I'll take a hula hoop or two, and it's basically just dancing, and the hoop is my dance partner. So in a way, I don't feel lonely because the hoop me. And then in a way, like I'm inside the circle of the hoop. And so I'm in my own world and shut out everything that's around me. I can absorb just nature. It's an incredible experience. But then what's even more interesting about hooping is you can hoop with just normal hoops. I have all kinds of tapes on my hoops to make them look fancy. And then I have LED hoops and smart hoops. And the smart hoops, actually, people are like, what? So I've got hula hoops that are Bluetooth enabled. They have remotes. I can hook them up to my phone. I can upload images on them in specific patterns, and they shuffle through patterns and they change. Some are sound reactive. Some have gyroscopes, so they know which way is down. So like in a dark room with that, it's really cool and impressive to see the lights, and it's mesmerizing. And it's also kind of meditative to just dark space, but be the light and have that circling around you. And you can also put them on fire.
Okay, I have not seen that yet. Maybe the next time. But those hoops that you got are amazing with the light patterns that you can program into them. And then you were saying, I think one of them at least can hear sound and can react to sound, but it kind of does work or sometimes doesn't work. That's pretty amazing that technology is out there, that somebody's decided there's enough demand for someone to build these things and to sell these. That's mind blowing.
Yeah, there's a whole community. They call them hoops, that make different types of designs and different types of features. So like I've seen a couple over the years. Like I saw the one before where it has like an LED screen on it, so I can like go through the setting. There's a hoop out there that actually is a very organic experience. I haven't tried it yet, but you actually like pick the settings by like moving it in 3D space, and then it'll like make up its own setting and patterns, and you can use that. So it's neat what people come up with, and it's programming really when it comes down to it. You get the hardware and the lights, but you program all the patterns and the abilities with that hardware.
It's such a little world, and yet when you start diving into it, there's so much in it. So now I'm thinking about software development and some of the, I'm totally changing topics, but one of the things that as a company where we hire developers, I think a lot about gender balance in software development or in technology fields in general. And this is something that I know in a number of different forums, people who hire try to find ways to engage more women, because I mean, one of the things that's great about 6 Feet Up is that there's a pretty good balance. It's almost 50-50 women and men in the team. And I see such amazing things coming out of these diverse points of view that it's so obvious to me that any group of people working together are going to come up with a better solution if there's a multiplicity of viewpoints. And so it's something that I would like to see. I would always like to have a good balance of women and men in teams. Is over your time as a professional software developer and before that, have you encountered any sort of discrimination that would have discouraged you from entering any field, like whether it's technology or biology or pre-med?
I mean, I definitely come across it. Like there's a moment, especially like quite frankly, as a Black female that's from a strong immigrant household, every once in a while I just stop and I take a look around me to see who's around me. And I used to do that a lot in my classes, being in like a medical science field, just like who else am I sitting in the room with? What's the diversity in this room with? And a lot of times I would be one of just a few, one way or the other. I'm very grateful that my parents somehow grew me up to have a pretty headstrong personality. Um, I think that comes to the curiosity where I was engaged enough with what I was interested in with that seeing people trying to pull me down from the outside never discouraged me, but lit a fire under me. So the worst things you could say to me is, you can't do that. Because at that point, it was like a personal, and that drove me to do a lot of things that maybe I would not have tried. When someone's like, oh no, she's not going to be able to do that. I will be by this time next year. I'm going to learn. I'm going to have that skill. So that drove me forward. But I know a lot of people don't necessarily have that kind of support or positivity or even the access to do that. And it is kind of disappointing when you go into a field, and definitely people are surprised when they see female programmers to this day. It always catches them off. They always think, oh, they're just designy first, or they're just front end. And no insult to design or front end, but it's kind of still a precondition that you see a female in a design or in a technology team, and they're probably in this facet. And so I've tried my best to make sure that I have a big range of skills, because the best thing you can do is, okay, this is my skill set and you can't contest it if I can do the work.
Right.
And that's happened in other fields too, even like in the medical science field. Like there's been, and this is almost a sad story, like there was a time when I was dealing with her and she came up to the window to ask for something. And she asked me one question and then walked down a little bit further to the male and asked him a different question. And he was busy. And I said, oh, no, I can help you with that too. And she's like, oh, I didn't know you knew how to use that computer. I'm like, whew, I had some feelings. But, you know, at that point, the only thing you can do is just say, okay, this is my skill set. I can just prove myself by being able to do that. And just by keeping that in mind, I've been able to get through a lot of those rough patches by saying, like, you know, have the confidence and skill set, even though I'm kind of nervous and shaky at times. But I'm just like, I've got to try at least first.
For you, I'm really glad that you've had the ability to react that way and to overcome those negative outside feelings from people. Um, I mean, I'm not going to say that our experience is at all equivalent, but there are some similarities, because I mean, I look around and I look, my gosh, how many Asians are there? I mean, actually, it's kind of a joke, because where I went to university in Canada, like when I went back 3 years ago, it seemed like the entire campus was Asian. But in technology fields, you kind of expect that. But then, you know, where we are, where I am in the Midwest, it's like, no. And so that sort of looking around and seeing who else is like me, it's kind of a weird feeling to not see similarities, in physical similarities anyway, in people around.
Yeah.
I'm glad
And
that
that's the importance of like representation in fields, and probably one of the biggest reasons where I would keep writing blog posts, even though, and I am an introvert, I can speak well, but I'm still really shy. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to be in the corner with my legs shaking, I'm sure. But I push myself to speak and to present because I know if you don't see someone, you're not going to think that you can do it. And so by me being able to present and talk and being a representative in the field, I think I can encourage other people as well.
you're making me think about ideas. Do you go, I mean, in your hometown, do you go back? I mean, do you go to schools? Are you interested in getting involved in local organizations for younger women or schools? Do you think about giving talks?
Definitely be interested. Like, I think so, because I came from a school that was, I would say 50% Black, 50% white, and then a couple of others in between. But I don't think, I think science and math was something available, but I don't think people are necessarily pushed into it still. So like when I was in high school, I definitely did a lot of STEM programs. I did STEM programs where I went to camps. I went to Rutgers University for a week every year for 4 years. I did some PACE programs, which was like engineering and science technology kind of stuff. So I was really fortunate that my parents put me into these, applied to these events. So I had a whole knowing of STEM all the way up. And that led me to this path just because I knew what it was. And that's half of the battle. Sometimes when you think about what do I want to be when I grow up, and you look at what you see the most, and if just TV is what you see the most, you're going to think a celebrity, a superstar, a singer, and nothing wrong with that. But there's so many other things you can be, and there's so many niche jobs, and there's so many where you can combine specific skills together. But if you've never heard about them, you're never going to think about them, and you might not nurture your talents to even get you into a good place to start. So like I was lucky that I had a computer from like when I think my first birthday picture is actually like me next to a Commodore. It's like a pink birthday cake, me on the table, and the Commodore in the background. And my dad always had me with the computer, like typing on the computer. When I was between 5 and 6, I had my own desktop PC. And like what I remember is my dad was basically games on this computer, and it was in MS-DOS. So CDs, change directory, dir list directory, you find them, you play them.
Wow.
And I'm like, I'm a kid, I want to play games on the computer. So that taught me how to traverse in MS-DOS. You know, I type windows.exe to get into Windows 3.1. I remember that experience. So just all of that leads you up to that kind of experience. Like I always had computer systems admin kind of stuff in my background, so it never left me. So if talking to groups can get them to start thinking about that, definitely.
Did your parents decide to put you into those programs when you were in school, or did you have an inkling that you were interested in them? Like how does that work? I'm trying to.
I think it's a mix. I definitely think it was a mix. I think once again, because computer stuff, when I was young and I was always into like computer games, and I always played like science computer games or like very educational based game. I wasn't much into console gaming at all as a kid. So I was nerdy and I was totally into it. And so when opportunities came up in school, I would definitely for them. And my parents would mention some opportunities they had at either their workplaces or stuff. So I was interested there. So I think it's both. It's like, oh, here's a thing that you could try. I'm like, I'm definitely going to try it. And then, oh, here's a thing from school I can try. And they would support me so I could go do it.
Can I ask what kind of work did your parents do?
Okay. So my dad is a systems administrator. So computers all the time. I think that's about as much as I know because of the work, but he did systems administration, and then my mom worked at a technology company as well. But I think she worked, if I recall, with like setting up programs. So like the things like those science programs, outreach programs, grants and stuff was the stuff she worked with.
Aha.
So I was like kind of in a really nice environment for that.
Yeah. My gosh. All right, let me keep digging in that area because I'm really curious. Do you know what got your parents even thinking about their careers? Like, how did they end up in those careers?
I'm not sure about my mom and my career, but my dad's a real smart guy. Like my parents gave me a good set of genes for where I am now, definitely. But like I think if I recall, my dad's degree was like physics and computer science.
Good Lord.
And
Yes.
he's also I'll read a book kind of person, and I've taken that as a model of what I do in life. So he was the type of person that, you know, I'm going to read this book about schematics and electrical wiring and start to put together something, or you know, I'll read a book about construction and then start to remodel areas in the house. So seeing that growing up, I've inherited a lot of the same, well, my dad could do that, I should be able to do that too. And so I pick up those little skills here and there.
Wow. Okay. That's very cool. Yeah, because I mean, I'm having two teenage boys. I'm faced with having to pay attention to, you know, which one is interested in what and why, or why is this one not interested in a thing. And it's just it's fascinating to think about what leads a person to be interested in a topic, and then what they do with it, because it can be so life-changing. I mean, an interest in like in my case, I started playing with programmable calculators. This is okay, I'm old, but programmable calculators, and that was like, you know, the crack that led me. Okay, maybe I shouldn't make light of it, but it's the thing that led me into programming, because I could do like lunar lander kind of programs with a calculator, and like look at what I've been able to accomplish so far. I mean, hopefully I've got a little time left to accomplish more. But I mean, it's just fascinating what sort of takes you into a detour, and then suddenly that detour becomes a career or a life's passion. So it's interesting to me to see, are the parents a factor? And if they are, you know, how are they influenced? And then, you know, what it's I think your family is very interesting.
Like I think a lot of it for me, and what I hear is I used to sit in like different diversity studies and things because I think it's really interesting to listen to people and talk to people. So like there was this diversity exercise which arranged a whole bunch of people into rooms randomly, and then they would ask us a question and then ask us to try and solve that question or discuss it or come up with something. And one of the meetings I was in, the thing that I heard a lot about trying to solve problems was opportunity.
Mm.
And that's a word that I use a lot too because of that, is a lot of people won't know the things that they like or they're interested in until they have an opportunity to experience them. And then when you find something that you're innately drawn to, I think you feel a spark right away. And no matter how much you try and go off that path, you're going to kind of feel that pull, like it just pulls you to it. It has an interest. So I feel really big. If you can have the opportunity to be exposed to that, then you can find that one time to do it. And I think it just pulls on you forevermore. So like me, I with the programming thing, like I said, like I did that when I was 12 years old or so. And I always did that as a background hobby. And I just always found ways to use it. Like I have a huge book collection and I wanted to manage it. And I didn't find anything online that did it. So like I wrote myself like a management system. And you know, I have an input form and that was actually in PHP.
We won't
And
talk about that.
I start somewhere. That just that was like, okay, that was my first time like using databases and structures, and like that taught me a whole bunch of stuff too. And So I'm a problem solver. So for me, that was a big part. Being able to solve problems, asking myself a question and do it led me to my place. And that just gave me that opportunity to keep learning more things.
Wow, Annette. Yeah, I mean, I can see that in our interactions at work, and then just at the retreat a couple of weeks ago. I mean, it's just obvious to me that those kinds of opportunities are things that you just jump at and you take advantage of them. And it's been great to see over just the past year when I've been able to work with you professionally to watch how you've progressed and how you've taken on new things and you've done amazing things with software and your ability to talk to people and show them great things. It's been wonderful, and I hope that we're going to keep being able to see more and more of this. And I want to stick around for a long time just to see where you end up going.
I of course hope I can do a lot more. Like I think that's what keeps me young at heart. It keeps my brain fresh. It's just, man, that's an opportunity to solve a problem. That's an opportunity to fix that. That's an opportunity to make something new. And that is the whole fun of programming is there are so many ways to do things and there's so many solutions, there's so many help, there's so many forms, read so much. And then the best thing I like is being able to read all that information and then putting out with my own spin. I do cooking a lot. If I have to cook something, I'll read like 5 or 6 recipes. And then once I feel like I've got a grasp on it, I'll close all the books and like go cook and
Wow.
just see what I come out with on the end.
So knowledge synthesis. There we go. All right. Well, thank you very much, Annette. It's been great to talk to you and find out more about you and dig into your deep, dark past, see what makes you tick. And I hope that we're going to do it again, and we're going to keep building great stuff together.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for having me. It's a lot of fun. And it's always fun to talk about nerdy software programming hoopy things. Yeah,
Woo.
just a day's work.